we all have our own, we all have our own strengths and weaknesses and characteristics. There's no point trying to fight it. You have your own strengths and weaknesses, and you can use those strengths and weaknesses to overcome your imposter syndrome. So what does imposter syndrome look like? Maybe you're afraid of failure or rejection. Maybe you feel like you're not good enough. This is what I was feeling when I was trying to work up the courage to do public speaking. Maybe you feel like you're a fraud amongst all of your peers, like you don't belong in that conference room. Do you feel these feelings in your daily life? Do you feel like you could do more, but there's something holding you back? But the good news is you're not alone. If you do some research on imposter syndrome, if you Google it, you'll find lots of studies that say a lot of us have imposter syndrome. In fact, about 80% of us have imposter syndrome. People like Jacinda Ardern, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, or Tom Hanks even, have imposter syndrome. And look at all the things that they accomplished, and they're still managing through their imposter syndrome. The other thing about imposter syndrome is it's internal. These are your own feelings about yourself. Nobody around you knows that you have imposter syndrome unless you actually tell them. So you don't have to tell them you have imposter syndrome. You can make it. You can realize your own goals. And the good news is you can also do something. You can do some techniques that you know from business analysis to manage your imposter syndrome. There are three strategies or core principles that I use to manage my own imposter syndrome. And just know that it never goes away, but you can use these three strategies to manage it, to temper it down, to help you realize your goals. My first strategy is to know thyself. Get to know what your own strengths and weaknesses are. The second strategy is to live by your own standards and goals. Only you know what your weaknesses are or your gaps are that you have to overcome. And of course, like we're all here today, to develop our learning mindset, to keep on learning and growing, learning from our experiences. Let's go into more detail about this learning mindset. So the first thing you need to reflect on is to know yourself, know thyself. And there are two techniques here that you're familiar with, mind mapping and SWOT analysis. I like to use these two techniques to reflect on myself and figure out what is it that I want to do? What are my career goals? So for example, I use mind mapping to figure out my own career directions. Some of you may be familiar with how this works. Basically, you have a central idea what your career directions are. And then you can sort of map out different thoughts, things, what are my best qualities? And then I'll write them all on these branches. What do I have experience in? So I'll look at my resume and see what I've done in my career and write down all my experiences on these branches. Things I want to learn, things I'm good at, things I like to do. And then you can also create other branches from the main branches. So for example, let's say I like to write. Well, there are opportunities in writing. I could do blogging, or I could even write a book. I also mapped out things that I hate to do. These are the things that I either delegate to other people or that I just avoid when I'm looking for jobs. So you know how to do mind mapping, and you can do this for yourself. And the really cool thing about actually putting this on paper is that you stop ruminating over all the insecurities you have. Once you write this down on paper, it also becomes sort of like a contract. You're the one who owns this, and you can live up to what you're saying here. what are your experiences? What are your best qualities? It's kind of hard to dispute all these things when you have it on paper. And that way you get to tone down the imposter syndrome. You get to tone down the negative self-talk and all the self-doubt. So when you write these things down, it becomes concrete. We're also, or most of us are familiar with SWOT analysis as well. You can create a SWOT analysis chart, mapping out your strengths and weaknesses, and thinking about externally, what are the opportunities and what are the threats? What are the opportunities that you can leverage your strengths to take? And with your strengths, how can you deal with the threats? When you think of weaknesses and you think of opportunities, how can an opportunity help to reduce that weakness? Perhaps there's a learning opportunity and you can pick a course that will help you overcome a certain weakness. And there are also the weakness and threat strategies. So knowing what threats are out there, what can you do, or what are your weaknesses and how can you deal with them? So how can you, for example, overcome a certain weakness to be able to deal with a threat that's out there? So for example, you're weak in a particular skill and there's a threat that you might lose your job because you're going to be obsolete because you don't know that skill. So that's an opportunity for you to learn that skill, take some courses, do some practice as well. So this is how you can use the SWOT analysis on yourself to figure out how you can deal with those opportunities and threats. And when you do this, it will gradually help you manage your imposter syndrome. Now, the other thing that I want to really emphasize is that you have to live by your own standards and goals. Remember how I talked about the SWOT analysis, your strengths and weaknesses, and I talked about the mind mapping. And with mind mapping, you'll also figure out where are your gaps? Where are the gaps in your own skills and your own knowledge? And your own gaps are probably different from the next person beside you. And that's why I feel it's really important to live by your own standards and goals and not to compare yourself with others. If you try to compare yourself to others, it's going to be the quickest way to sabotage your goals. It's going to be the quickest way to talk yourself down and think that you don't deserve to reach your goals. So don't compare yourself to others. Think about your own strengths and weaknesses and your own goals and live by them yourself. The other thing that you can look at is some of these other techniques. We can do prioritization, right? We know how to do Moscow prioritization. We also know how to do journey mapping. And I'll explain how this can work in practice when you're doing business analysis on yourself. And of course, you can do KPIs on yourself. Figure out how well you're making progress towards your goals. Let's look at these in detail. Let's look at journey mapping as an example. So one of the things that I've used to sort of reflect on my own career is I draw an XY axis. And up at the top, I have the high points in my career. And up at down below the x-axis, I have the low points in my career. The jobs that I didn't like, the jobs that were stressful or that I wasn't learning anything. So you map out over time what jobs you've had and whether it was enjoyable, whether you're productive and learning things. And you do this whole chart. And what this will help you do is figure out what are the things you really enjoy doing? What are the jobs you enjoyed? And it'll help you go and seek those kinds of jobs. So this is really a way to be honest with yourself. And it'll also help you focus on getting jobs that will be productive for you. What about key performance indicators? I think we kind of all groan when we think about key performance indicators, or at least our stakeholders do, when we kind of hold them accountable to the KPIs. But this is something that we should be doing because this is how we grow. We can't improve unless we're actually measuring things. So what I would suggest is, I think most of you are members, or if you're an IIBA member, you can go to the IIBA Career Resources and the IIBA Career Center and use the competency model assessment tool. So you can download this fillable PDF, and it asks you questions on your level of skill and knowledge about the different tasks in the 6 knowledge areas. So you're rating yourself against a certain level of proficiency in all of these 6 knowledge areas. And you don't really have to share this with anyone, but it's just to measure yourself and see how you're doing with those 6 BA knowledge areas. And what's kind of cool is you can download it, fill it out, save it locally, and then fill it out again in 6 months after you've done some, after you've learned a few things or practiced a few things. You can see how you've grown in the different knowledge areas. So definitely go to the Career Center, download the IIBA Competency Model Assessment Tool, and see where your strengths and weaknesses are. The other thing that you can do is take a copy of the BABOK, look at the table of contents, and see how you think you rate against all those different tasks. You can do a gap assessment on the areas that you want to improve. So this should all start to sound familiar with how you develop KPIs and measure them over time. And of course, we have to develop that learning mindset. Never stop learning. In our industry, it's really a knowledge-based industry. So you have to keep on learning. You have to keep developing your skills. Otherwise, you could become obsolete. So you can use things like measuring your performance improvements or identifying your performance improvements. You know how to do lessons learned. And you also know how to fail fast, right? So try things, learn from your experiences. Unless you actually try, you're not going to realize whether or not you're successful. Let's look at lessons learned. I think a lot of us are familiar with the keep doing, stop doing, start doing chart. So you can fill out this chart throughout your career. These are the things that I want to keep doing in my career. These are the things I want to stop doing in my career, and things I want to start doing in my career. And I'm using this, daily, or not daily. I'm using this now to figure out my career directions as well. This is also going to help you figure out, for the things that you want to keep doing or start doing, what courses do you have to take, or who do you have to reach out to for some mentorship. You'll also learn from, I guess, unsuccessful or less desirable jobs, the things you want to stop doing. For me, I've decided I get roped into, quite often, I get roped into software projects where I end up doing test execution, which is not what I want to do anymore. So now I'm conscious of job opportunities that sound like they're going to require me to do testing, and I basically turn down those particular jobs. So those are the things that you can reflect on and can learn some lessons from. So I want to wrap this up with some final thoughts. The first strategy to use is to know thyself. Only you know that you have imposter syndrome, and only you know what your own insecurities are. Why is it that you have those insecurities? Or what gaps do you have to overcome in order to meet your goals? Live by your own goals, your own your own strengths and weaknesses, right? So this is about you getting to know yourself, figuring out what you want to do, and definitely not comparing yourself to others. When you compare yourself to others, it's going to sabotage your goals because you're the one who has to figure out your own path. Develop that learning mindset, and it needs to be continuous. You need to keep exercising it just like a muscle. And you've probably realized that as you learn things, you start to connect the dots, and learning becomes easier as you go along. And I'll leave you with two final words. Don't be afraid to fail, because fail doesn't mean failure. FAIL is an acronym. FAIL just stands for first attempt in learning. And the other word is no. And no doesn't mean rejection. It's also an acronym. It just means next opportunity. And with that, I just want to thank all of you for attending. I hope that you're able to take some of this to heart and practice your BA skills. Give yourself some BA treatment, because we all do really good BA work for our clients and stakeholders. Why not do BA work for ourselves? And with that, I am going to hand the floor back to Steve and Bob if there are any questions.
Thank you, Emily, for sharing your insights. If anyone has any questions, you could unmute yourself and ask. If you want to type it into the chat box, that's good as well. I think it was really insightful for all of us to kind of, sometimes, you know, we worry about others a lot and we're on the go trying to get all this work done. And you really do have to take some time for yourself to, you know, cultivate your own career, because you definitely reap what you sow. So, and then I was thinking about the green thing, and I said, well, what are some green things that aren't so scary, or maybe they are, but one is golf. I like playing golf, and I think of green and golf go together, though it's hard to get on the green sometimes. And then money's green, but the biggest thing is, hopefully no one's afraid to be green on Friday because it's St. Patrick's Day. So, you know, looking forward to that. Does anyone have any questions before, Steve, I'll turn it over to you to sort of conduct the end of this and wrap us up. So does anyone have any questions?
Hi, Emily. Tejas here. A wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. The first question was, when you say no, when no is not rejection, what does that mean? Does that mean that that as BAs we should be more requirement oriented, or so
yeah, it's just my interpretation.
Uh-huh.
You know, no doesn't mean rejection. It doesn't, if someone tells you no to your face,
Uh-huh.
It doesn't mean that no, you're a loser. It doesn't mean they're telling you you're a loser.
So no means yes?
No means, okay, I will learn from this experience and go on to the next opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if you fail, let's say at a job interview,
uh-huh.
don't feel like it's rejection. It's, okay, maybe this one wasn't for me. I'm going to go to the next opportunity.
And
so it's not, you know, everyone here is a good person. We all deserve what we work at.
I know you have another question, Tejas, but let me just share this because it's timely. They had a thing the other day, it was on Facebook, and it had a picture of a young woman on a train in New York, mm-hmm. and she just came back from an audition, and they told her she wasn't good enough, she wasn't pretty enough for the mm-hmm. part. Mm-hmm. And guess who that person was? Meryl Streep.
Wow.
So it said she just didn't take no, you know, and internalize it. She said, I'm going to do this because I want to do it. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they said she ended up winning or nominated 18 Oscars. So I think that's an example of, you know, just fighting through the no's.
Don't give up. Don't give up. If it's something you're hungry for, don't give up.
Yeah, sorry about that. 18 no's is a lot. to take and to overcome? As business analysts, can we say that ideally we look for we look for um we look for changes in, like, say, a SWOT analysis, something like that breaks down your overall skill set into strengths and something to do that, would you say?
Yeah, you can use SWOT analysis to reflect on something that happened. So let's say you feel like you didn't do a really good job at a particular job,
Mhm,
or let's say you failed at a job interview.
mhm,
You can use your SWOT analysis to say, okay, so what are my strengths and weaknesses?
mhm.
And what can I do about my strengths and weaknesses to address future opportunities and the threats that are out there? So it's all about learning from your mistakes, well, learning from your successes and your mistakes.
So you have to keep innovating, keep like
Yeah.
keep innovating, and
Develop
then
that learning mindset. Just keep going.
keep going. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. It was
Yeah,
wonderful of you.
yeah.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation as well. Thank you.
And
Hi,
none of us is
Emily.
a bad person. We can do it. Yeah. Question?
Hi, this is Denise Lingberg. I didn't have a question. I just wanted to make a comment. I read this quote a couple of weeks ago that I wrote down, and hearing your presentation, it made me go back and reread it. But the quote was, "Be the person you want to be. Don't wait until you're ready. Do it now." And that's kind of what I took from your presentation tonight as well. So
Yeah. We all have our own aspirations, right? Don't let people hold you back from them. You know,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
you know, like 10 years from now, are you going to regret what you didn't do or what you did?
Mhm.
And, you know, like, it's not going to be a straight path to success all the time, right? So we have to keep trying and experimenting and doing hard things to learn and grow. But, you know, we each have our own goals and we can each get there. And, you know, like, speaking of quotes, I also learned another quote recently about people who, if we take things to heart and we take things personally and we start internalizing all of our doubts, you know, if someone is saying no to you, that's like letting them live in your brain rent free. Like, no one should live in your brain rent free and take over all your thoughts, right? Kick them out and live by
Yep.
your own goals and standards. Does anyone have any thoughts? Questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. Yeah, like everybody's in agreement. I think that was a wonderful presentation. We appreciate it. And I just wanted to share that, you know, I think probably few of us know ourselves as well as we know like our significant others. So I think stepping back and taking the time to really, you know, look at yourself and your strengths and weaknesses is very valuable. When I was in the early stage of my career, I was always hesitant to apply for any position where I didn't meet all of the job requirements. If I couldn't check them all off, I didn't feel confident enough to go into an interview or even necessarily fill out the application for such a position. But we all know, you know, the reality is that it's very, very seldom that any applicant gets a position where they meet all of the job requirements. So again, thank you. That was wonderful. And I took screenshots of your some of your tools.
I believe that this slide deck will be shared with the audience, so you'll be good to go with that. And yeah, you're right. Like, it really is about knowing yourself. I find writing it down on paper, like the old-fashioned pen and paper, actually really works, because you could pull it out 6 months from now and go, "Yeah, I did do that," right?
And there's just something about putting pen to paper, you know, where it's in your mind is one thing, but once it's on paper,
Yes, when it swirls around your head and you're thinking about it and it just bothers you all weekend, that it's not productive. But when you write it on paper, it's kind of like journaling, right? You get it out, get your thoughts on paper, and then you can sort through them. And then you can sort your strengths and weaknesses. And you know, the other thing that I think of is, like, think about all the things you've done in your career and all of your accomplishments. all the accomplishments you've made in your career. If you have imposter syndrome, just know that you deserve those accomplishments. Right? You did them. No one can take that away from you, no matter how much they, no matter how much they complain at you today. You made those accomplishments, and you deserve them. So yes, paper helps.
Thank you, Emily. And for all those who contributed, does anyone have any other comments or dialogue that you want to bring up?
This is Denise Larcade. I'll just share my experience. I come from a background in mergers and acquisitions, and my career started out in mergers and acquisitions because I fell into my first one. And it's very easy to get lost in your first one. You forget who you are, why you're there. It's very intimidating to be acquired by another company and be amongst who are your peers, but you don't view them as your peers. You almost view them as your competitors because they were your competitors before you got acquired. And I found it really helpful to stay true to myself and focus on myself and not get on board the ride of others' journeys during the merger and acquisition activities. It's very easy to fall into that, where you're kind of on a roller coaster ride when you're listening to what people are saying and how people are feeling. Your emotions run all over the place and you can be exhausted at the end of the day. But it's really important to step back, focus on you, your goals, and your skills and your strengths and what you possess. And I think that journey map is also important because I found as I was part of 9 mergers and acquisitions, and in that I was in so many, I found that my journey map was very important because it's like my elevator speech. So when you meet who you're now associating with in the organization, it's important to be able to let them know who you are, what your skills and your background is without handing your resume. So the journey map was a way of doing that, as well as the SWOT to manage my emotions and my feelings on a regular basis. So thank you. It was a great presentation, Emily.
Thank you, Denise. That was a really cool story. And I can imagine the emotional roller coaster and how it must have really been draining.
It is. It's
Yeah.
physically and emotionally exhausting.
Yeah, and we have to take care of ourselves, take care of our careers. I don't think a lot of people will do that for us. Right? We have to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then doing that SWOT, figuring out what you're good at, where your weaknesses are. We keep telling all of our stakeholders to do this, right? We need to do it ourselves. Are there any thoughts or comments? As a side note, you can tell I've gotten comfortable now doing public speaking. After that conference that I went to in 2016, I still waited a couple of years to work up the courage to do public speaking. It was only a year and a half ago that I decided to join Toastmasters to actually do something about my imposter syndrome, about getting on stage and sharing my knowledge. So I'm still going through my learning process, but there are tools and resources and lots of learning materials that you can use to help you advance. But you won't know if you're gonna, you don't know where you want to go unless you actually do some of that self-reflection.
Great insight and great advice. All right, anyone else have a story you want to share or just any thoughts you want to share? All right, I'm not hearing anything, so we're gonna move on to the next piece. But before we do, I forgot to mention in the introduction that our next meeting is going to be April 19th. We're going to have the topic is going to be Power Skills Boot Camp for the business analyst. An online webinar just like this one. We are also getting to a point where we're starting to think about maybe we could start having in-person meetings. So one of the things we might do is we might partner with the local PMI group and do some type of in-person event. So stay tuned for that. And hopefully nothing gets crazy to disrupt that plan. All right, Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of take us home.
Okay. I'm screen sharing. Can you guys see my screen?
I see the agenda.
Agenda, okay. I'm not gonna go to the next slide yet because there's music on it, but if, the next part is this, is our quiz. So if you go back to Menti.com on your phone, the code was 89718699, which I think is in the chat. There's 5 questions. You get points for getting it right, and you get points for answering quickly. And then we have a prize at the end, a $25 Amazon card that we got from Experius. And then we'll do a raffle for another $25 gift card. And then stay tuned for in the next few days, you'll get a survey in your email if you can take that. I have another raffle prize there too. So let's go to the next slide. Can you hear the music?
Yeah.
All right. I'll give it a second before we start, if anybody else wants to join.
And I know it's over the music, but while we're doing this, so Emily, we do have a gift card in appreciation for your taking your time and presenting and your 3-hour difference too. So I'll be sending you an email for that. It won't be spam.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come and chat with you folks, to share my knowledge, to show how we can actually use business analysis. Fun for fun. See if people were listening.
Can we get one more?
Oh man, I love this music. I love this music.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. First question. Oh, here we go. Enter to start the quiz. I picked the third one on purpose, but that is a real thing. It's a NASA as a SWAT thing. Come on. Key performance indicators is the right answer. is all of them. Thought that song was over. There's no wrong answer to this question. Right, Andrea? Okay, I think that was enough of that music.
Now we all have that earworm.
Right, okay, give me a second here for the raffle.
So Andrea won the quiz.
Yes, I got her name.
Great. Congratulations.
Yes, and here we go. My computer's a little choppy, so we'll see where it stops. All right, Cynthia. All right. That's all I have. I'll get those prizes out. We'll also have the recording and the slide deck on the website, probably later tonight, early tomorrow.
Great. Thank you, everybody. And thanks, Steve, again, for all the work that you do, and to the rest of my board members who are on this call for all the work that you do on behalf of our members. And hopefully you all can join us in April. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for
Thank you.
attending. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, Emily. I hope I have the recording because I got kicked out early on in the call. It took me a
There was
minute to get
something,
back
right?
in.
Like it, yeah, you might want to stop it now.